it grew from just a small block, a city block, to taking up 2 miles of the main street in St. Ignace.
Really?
One end to the other, nothing but the finest automobiles you'll ever see. And it became so wild and so debaucherous that the Michigan State Police would line up their Blue Goose cruisers for 5 miles down the major highway in St. Ignace. Vic Biondi would spin records behind the big boy. Car hops on roller skates. I mean, it was absolutely nuts, right? 10,000 people, a couple thousand cars cruising, burnouts, clouds of nitrogen. It was absolutely wild. And that's another great thing about this book. One of the 5-star reviews on Amazon says, every major automotive type of the last 50 years is either documented or interviewed in this book.
Well, hey everybody, it's Eric with Muscle Cars. Eric coming at you today, and I have got a really great opportunity here to interview the author of Rebel Without a Clue, Sean Ravey, and the book is about his father, Edward Ravey, who had a dream when he was 16 years old, and he was from a little town in northern Michigan, actually the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, called St. Ignace, Michigan. His dream was to have the coolest, largest, most successful car show in the entire country, and he accomplished that over the years. So we're going to talk to Sean a little bit about the story behind the book Rebel Without a Clue, which incidentally is Amazon's #1 bestseller right now, and you can pick it up on Amazon. I'm going to drop a link below here so you can go right to Amazon through my link and pick it up and have it delivered to you, and I highly encourage you to get it. As a matter of fact, here's the book right here, and it is a really cool read, easy to read. Sean is an amazing author. Consequently, it's #1 bestseller on Amazon's list. So, Sean, tell us about how this whole project started. Because, I mean, you know, you've been involved with your dad for obviously forever. But how does this whole thing start? What's the history of the story with your dad?
The history of the story started with me when I was 9. Okay. I stood next to my father. This was 1976. And we had the first annual St. Ignace Car Show, which was supposed to be a 1-year event. And my father's dream was a little bigger than that. He grew up a greaser, you know, ducktail, leather jacket, coolest cars in town. I mean, he knew how to modify them. He knew how to get the right differential with the horsepower and the right muffler and everything. And the town wanted to have a bicentennial celebration, 1976.
Oh, of course, sure.
And he said, how about a car show? And they said, sounds good if you do it. And he did. And they expected maybe 50 people, 50 cars to come. And 136 came. And
now St. Ignace is really, back then it was teeny.
It's still a teeny town. In fact, the population is pretty static. It's been 2,000 to 2,500 people my entire life.
Wow.
And there's no stoplights. And so a car show in a town with no stoplights. That's interesting. Because the cruising scene in Detroit was 6 hours away. And that's how remote St. Ignace is. You have to cross the Mackinac Bridge, which is a 5-mile long suspension bridge into St. Ignace, to come and to see the show. And the thing that made St. Ignace great through the years is my dad actually did not like the way car shows were presented. They were always in a fairground or in an old arena in, you know, a parking lot that really didn't, it seemed to be a distraction off the beaten path and people had to go to it. My dad was really the first person to take the show and put it into the city itself. Make it a complete synergy between them.
That's very creative.
And with the Mackinac Bridge and the show, it grew from just a small block, a city block, to taking up 2 miles of the main street in St. Ignace.
Really?
One end to the other, nothing but the finest automobiles you'll ever see. And through the years, I mean, I grew up with Dad introducing me to Carroll Shelby and Zora Arcus Duntop and Bill Mitchell and Don Garlitz and Wally Parks and Gordon Beering and Tom Gale and Jerry Palmer and all of these phenomenal...
Batman guy too, right?
Yeah, George Barris. And who can forget George Barris?
Yeah, right.
Coolest thing, in 1949, my father at 9 years of age was going to buy a comic book and some candy. He went to the drugstore, saw a big, beautiful magazine called Motor Trend. And it was volume 1, issue 1.
No way.
And he picked it up and
That is so cool.
And he picked it up and read a story about George Barris and the things he was doing to cars. And that was it for that. I mean, George Barris became his hero. Dad wanted to do things to his cars when he could get them. And he did, and flash forward to 1985, and who's sitting in the Batmobile with George Barris but my father, driving down the streets of St. Ignace, Michigan.
Very, very
Because
cool.
George Barris was the
That's
guest
the original
speaker.
Batmobile.
That's the original Batmobile, 1966 Batmobile. So that's the genesis of the St. Ignace show, and it grew and it grew, and he kept adding attractions. It just wasn't about a show anymore.
Like what kind of attractions?
He added a parade, which became
Okay.
the largest in the state of Michigan. He added a concert series.
The largest in the state of Michigan, yet it was the Hudson's Day Thanksgiving Parade, or the Hudson's Thanksgiving Day Parade was huge.
Huge.
This is bigger than that.
It was a 2.5 hour long parade
I'll be damned.
in St. Ignace, Michigan. It absolutely blew people's mind. He brought in the legends of the 60s music scene. He had 16 of the top 200 acts on Billboard's top 200 in our small gymnasium in St. Ignace. He added a muscle car mania. He had all these other attractions that just continually pushed the show out more from one day. Now we're on a Friday.
Right.
Now we're on a Thursday. And now we're on a Sunday because we're doing VIP tours with Domino's Pizza founder, Detroit Tiger owner, Tom Monahan.
Monahan, of course.
And
Yeah.
so it went from an event to an experience. And people came from all over the world to cover this car show. And Dad did it for 40 years.
40.
40 years.
That's a good long time.
And his health started to decline.
Yeah.
And so he decided the time had come and he sold his show
Okay.
to the St. Ignace Visitors Bureau. And it's still going on. It was the 46th year this year.
Really?
And last year, Top Hat John Genza, you know him as well as I do,
Yeah.
just one of the top automotive historians.
Dude, he's crazy cool.
No
Smart.
equal. Oh,
Yeah.
just an amazing man.
Yeah.
We always go out for ice cream the Sunday after the show.
Okay.
Every year we meet at the same place. We have ice cream. We talk about the show and what we're going to do next year. And Dad was having a really bad time with his health. It was hard to move. He was having a hard time eating his ice cream. And John just said, Ed, I've always wanted to ask you this question. How in the hell did you get Carroll Shelby to this time? And usually Dad just kind of laughs and doesn't
Carroll
really
Shelby
answer.
is legend.
He was a
Right.
god.
Yeah, he was.
An automotive god.
Absolutely.
And Dad told the story how he got Carroll Shelby.
Well, let's hear it briefly because we
Yeah.
want people to read the book, though, right?
We do.
Okay.
The prologue of the book starts with a private plane landing in little tiny St. Ignace Airfield with two of the biggest legends in the history of the automotive world, Zora Arkus Duntov and Carroll Shelby, coming to town.
For those people that don't know, they should know if they're car people, but Zora was the original designer of the Corvette, is that right?
Now, Harley Earl designed it. Zora wrote a letter, famously wrote a letter to GM, said, I think you're onto something, but your car sucks. Underpowered, bland, it can't compete with anything on the European circuit. And so they brought him in to take over as a head engineer for the Corvette project.
Oh, wow, okay.
And, that was the development of the C1, and then Zora developed the C2 starting in '63 with the famous split window that he and Bill Mitchell argued over because Bill was big on the split window. Zora said it was awful because you can't see. And so they only did it for that 1 year. But when Carroll Shelby came to St. Ignace, it was like Woodstock North. Absolutely wild. The prologue of the book is Carroll Shelby arriving in St. Ignace, and my father, if anyone ever met Dad in his prime, 6'3", 220 pounds, totally in control of everything. He was literally wetting his pants when he saw that plane touch down and Carroll Shelby walk out of that airplane and come over to him. And Carroll Shelby called him the most persistent son of a bitch he's ever known in his life.
That is cool.
Because he never
that
gave
says
up.
a lot, yeah.
He never gave up. Dad said, well, I guess it worked, didn't it?
Yeah.
And they
Nice.
they hit it off immediately. I remember Zora and Carroll came to the house. And here I am in 1984. I'm 16 years old. And I've got Carroll Shelby and Zora Arkus Duntov in my living room. And the famous picture here is of Carroll and Zora and my father. I took this picture. And the shenanigans that my dad and Carroll Shelby got into is a whole chapter in the book. And I'll just
I can only imagine.
yeah, and just imagine how crazy, because Dad, in 1973, the greatest car movie in the world came out. American Graffiti. And Dad wanted to relive the best years of his life, cruising to the best music with his girlfriends and his friends, and he saw it on the screen. He wanted to have a cruise night. So he created, one of the other things he created was a cruise night that grew.
Does this coincide with
The Friday night before the show.
Okay.
And it became so wild and so debaucherous that the Michigan State Police would line up their Blue Goose cruisers for 5 miles down the major highway in St. Ignace. Vic Biondi would spin records behind the big boy. Car hops on roller skates. I mean, it was absolutely nuts, right? 10,000 people, a couple thousand cars cruising, burnouts, clouds of nitrogen. It was absolutely wild. So Dad and Carol were on their way there. And I won't tell this story because it's in the book, but I will say that red, white, and blue usually symbolizes freedom, unless they're flashing in your rearview mirror.
Valid point.
Valid point. So that happened. Just as both of them are taking a swig off of Bud Long Neck.
No way.
And so that story's in the book, as is another one when Dad and Carol finally made it out to cruise night. Dad was terrified to bring Carol Shelby into that crowd. So they luckily got into a restaurant that had one table left, and there's an even better story of what the waitress said to Carol Shelby when Carol ordered a hamburger and french fries. And basically, automotive people around the world went, what did she just say to him? So that is also a hilarious story.
Okay.
And Dad told all these stories like he had just lived it. Right. And my dad and he has dementia. So after that ice cream summit, as it's known, I got really sad.
Ice cream summit.
Yeah,
That's pretty
I got really sad, and I said to myself, all these stories are going to be gone once his mind's erased.
Right.
And I started thinking the best way to preserve this, podcast. No, he wouldn't know how to do that. Newspaper story, not enough space. And then I have a journalism degree, and I've written books, but they're yet to be published because I'm still an active police officer, and everyone loves reading police street stories.
Right.
So I have a whole trilogy set, but I said, you know what I'm going to do? I called John, Top Hat, said, this is what I want to do. I want to write a book about my father in the car show. And he didn't miss a beat. I think it's the best idea I've ever heard. And so I went home, I called my dad, and I told him, get your yellow legal pad ready. Here's your homework. You and I are going to do this book together.
Very cool.
And
now, when was this? How long ago was
that? That was July 3rd last year.
Of 2021.
Yeah. So
wow.
I set a goal to release it before this year's car show so we could debut the book in June.
Okay.
And so it was 10 months of nonstop.
I can only imagine.
Interviews and writing and
editing. You interviewed basically the who's who in the automotive world.
I did. And that's another great thing about this book. One of the 5-star reviews on Amazon says, every major automotive type of the last 50 years is either documented or interviewed in this book. Men who have done the most incredible cars, not only car designers, car guys, lead singer of the Crystals, Freddie Boom Boom Cannon, Candy Clark from American Graffiti, Bo Hopkins from American Graffiti, Alex Dvorsky from the Ice Road Trucker series. I mean, this book has it all. And I interviewed every one of them, and it's all preserved on audio tape.
That's so cool.
And so I started out with a project. I thought, God, I hope I can get 200 pages out of this and make it worthwhile to tell this story.
Right.
200 pages was just the interview with my dad.
Oh, wow.
And I hadn't even included any of cruise night, of the parade, of the interviews with, Tom Peters and Jerry Gale, Jerry Palmer and Tom Gale and Big John Moss and all of these folks. And it turned into an incredible project. And
I bet it did.
And
look at you, you're lighting up the Christmas tree, just sharing it. I can only imagine the emotional satisfaction you get from writing a story about your dad, who sounds like he was the coolest cat in the whole wide world.
Coolest cat in the world, man.
To do the book and it's just exciting stuff.
And because I work full time, and I have a children's foundation.
Right.
It's full time work. So someone asked me, how in the world did you write a book this big and do all of those other things? And I said, well, it has nothing to do with can. It's why.
Right.
Why am I writing a book? Because I want my dad's story to be heard and him to read it before he dies.
And that's very cool.
And that's what happened. And my God, he's living his best life. I mean, people are driving up from mid-state Michigan to get an autograph from him, come to his home, meet him, get pictures with him. He's recognized on the street. People, it's the Rebel! And it's just an amazing thing.
So cool.
And funny enough, the title, about 20, 25 years ago, there's this great spot in the show area that's been on the cover of every major magazine in the world for automotive.
Oh, okay.
And we always would drive to that spot, and from there you can look down on the entire 2 miles of the show with Lake Huron right there sparkling,
Yeah.
the island boats going by. and just see the humanity. 100,000 people at one point came to the show with 3,500 cars.
That's amazing.
And I said, Dad, you know, one of these days this is going to make a really good book. And he said, well, whoever writes it, make sure they call it Rebel Without a Clue, because I have no idea how I did this.
That is so cool.
And so I remembered that. And when I told him what the title was, instantly, that's what I told you all those years ago. I'm like, I know, I know it is.
Cool, dude.
So, and you know, just calling people, hey, I'm doing a book on Ed Ravy. And I'm talking to Brian Baker, who is the vice president of the Automotive Hall of Fame. And I'm like, man, I can't get a hold of, I think it was Ken Gross, who's another fabulous automotive historian. And he said, okay, hold on a second. He said, okay, I just sent him a text message. 5 minutes later, Ken Gross was beeping in on the other phone.
Wow.
That's how word traveled. You know, Larry Wood, the guru.
Well, you're in the top tier of the automotive people, so they're all connected by phone and pager anyhow.
And that's the great thing. Ken Lingenfelter was the guest of honor this year, the Lingenfelter Collection.
Yes, of course. Famous designer or manufacturer, fabricator, whatever.
Absolutely incredible. The largest car collection in the world. He called me at work. Hey, Ken Lingenfelter here. I heard you trying to get a hold of me. Like, yes, I am. You know?
Nope.
And we spent 30 minutes on the phone just talking. And he said, you know the great thing about car guy, Sean? I'm like, no. He goes, this.
And that's one thing I've found, and I know you have too, but I've found that the car guys, it doesn't matter what your socioeconomic status is. A car guy is a car guy is a car guy.
Yeah.
I hang out with these guys that have huge collections, and I hang out with these guys that have one really cool car in their garage, and it's all chit chat. It's all talking about cars. It's all talking about the cool stuff. It's all talking about burnouts, and the best smell in the world is nitromethane or racing fuel or burning rubber, you know? I mean,
yeah, and you see someone as accomplished as Ken Lingenfelter, he sees a rat rod on the side of the road. He's going to go talk to the guy.
Right.
Tell me about your car. Tell me about your car. And he asked me the coolest question when it was the last interview of the book, but I made it the first interview I published because he was this year's guest of honor.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, so I wanted the book to be current.
Yeah.
And he said, hey, Sean, just one question before I leave, before I let you go. I'm like, yes, sir. He goes, am I going to have a chance to meet your father? I said, absolutely. So that was the premise of the book. He said, after I did that interview, I wrote, now everyone's going to get a chance to meet my father. And I go right into Dad as a 6-year-old.
Now, when he asked to meet your father, was that what prompted you to make him the big guy for the show, or did you already have that pre-planned?
Oh yeah, this was April before the show. He was already, Murray Pfaff gave me all of his information and told him I wanted to get a hold of him.
Okay.
But it was just a spontaneous question that played perfectly into the beginning of the book. And, you know, Dad growing up on Silver Sands Resort, the relationship between my father and his father, you will literally laugh until you burst a stitch. I mean, it's absolute. My dad had to pay rent to live in his house.
Okay.
And his father was the crew cut Depression-era man.
Yep, gotcha.
Worked his whole life to have something. And he just couldn't get over this little rascally blonde-haired kid who wanted to make old discarded peach crates into a car, which he did, which there's pictures of in here.
No kidding.
Of Dad customizing an orange crate to make it look like a car.
That's pretty
when he was 7 years old.
I'll be there.
So the book is full of
He
stories
had his
like
creativity
that. He did.
His whole life.
He did. By the time he was 7 years old, he could tell you every make and model of every car he saw. And even when we're driving together, he could hear it and tell you what exhaust system it is. It's amazing. I mean, Jerry Palmer referenced that in the book. He goes, your dad was the real deal. He knew cars.
That's pretty cool.
He wasn't just... And the cool thing, Big Daddy Ed Roth, everybody knows the Big Daddy.
Yeah,
the Big Daddy.
Of course, yeah.
He wouldn't come because...
The rat feet guy.
The rat feet.
Yeah.
He was, you want to talk out there. He didn't like car show promoters because he felt they were in it for the wrong reason.
Right.
And he told my dad that. Don't know you, but I don't like you. If you're a car show promoter. So I'm not coming to your show. Great. I hear it's wonderful. Whatever. So Dad wrote him a letter. Very impassioned letter. And he said, I do not do this show for the money. I do it for the quality of the show itself. And that's what got Big Daddy Ed Roth to come to St. Angus, Michigan.
No kidding.
And after he came, he wrote in his book, Confessions of a Ratfic, he compared Ed Ravy, the promoter, as an artist of auto show promotion, much as Von Dutch is an artist. And that's how impressive a man my father is. because he captures everyone's imagination because he's the biggest fan in the room.
That's very crazy cool.
It is crazy cool, and that's how you get guys like George Barris, who almost didn't come.
Right.
We're talking Wednesday before the show, he's saying, I'm not coming. And it was a battle that Dad had to bring in a future guest of honor to referee to get George Barris to come to St. Agnes.
Really?
And yeah, stories in the book.
Okay. I'm gonna watch the book. And that reminds me, so I don't want to say as we wrap up, but I want to find out, is there any closing comments you want to make right now?
Right now,
On the book.
about the book, it's the only book you'll ever find of its kind to have the people who built the American dream
That's right.
in the world of automotive interviewed.
That's awesome.
Any car that you've seen have been designed or built or know by the people who are in this book.
So now, I know they can contact you, but give me, you have your nonprofit organization, Put on the Cape Foundation for Hope, and then also Amazon. Where can people contact you if they want to write to you about the book, or they want, I know they can order the book on Amazon, but is there any other way they can contact you?
Yes, Sean at putonthecape.org.
Sean at putonthecape.org. I'm going to drop a link below on that.
And that's to my children's foundation that is now in its 8th year.
That's good.
So, and I'm donating 10% of the proceeds from the book to my foundation to give to our child crisis centers we support here in Arizona and mental health.
Well, you know what they say in Muscars there.
Drive it like you
stole it, bitches. All right. Thanks,
Outstanding.
guys. All right. You got to check out this book. I'm dropping a link below. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, guys out there. You got to check out the book. I'm here to tell you. All right. Later. Hey guys, thanks for watching the last video. I hand selected a couple videos for you to watch right now. Click here.